Hey, what's going on, everybody? Martino here from Extract Media, here to talk about The Last of Us episodes 4 and 5. I paired these together because they're both directed by Jeremy Webb, so I figured that they'd be very interconnected for that reason. And I was very correct. Each episode kind of enhances the other in this in particular case. I really like that about this. Both of these episodes are just very close to what happened in the actual video game, which was very different for the show in a way. I mean, they got a lot right and a lot accurate, but they were very precise, even though there were still deviations, which I love that so much because we got to learn so much more about characters that the game players are so familiar with within this world. That was just so much appreciated. We'll get to that here in a little bit. I love that episode 4 incorporated Ellie's joke book in a way that we really hadn't seen in the game, but it was brought over from the game for sure. And the amount of comedic moments that came out of this when she's telling these puns to Joel, and Joel's just kind of like keeping this mask on that he's just not affected by these jokes. They're not going to make him laugh. He doesn't find them funny, is what he's pretty much trying to get off to Ellie, or the way he's trying to come across to Ellie is that he's just not going to find this funny. And then it kind of ties right back around to the end of the episode when he does start laughing. He's really starting to see Ellie as a human being. I love the usage of the Hank Williams song. I think fans will really appreciate it. In fact, they called the episode Please Hold to My Hand based on a lyric from that song, which I thought was just magnificent. Ellie finding the dirty magazine in the back of the truck, even word for word of that scene was pretty much straight out of the game as well. They crash the truck, there's a shootout, but something is different from the show to the game in the shootout area. And the biggest difference here is that every death that happens, even on the side of the bad guys in this case, or the Raiders, it matters. It feels real. They made every death matter. In the game, you're killing a lot more, but they really want the audience to buy into this world that they're trying to set up. And the acting here from the gentleman who was dying when he was calling for his mother was so unsettling to watch, but that had to be the point because they don't want to glorify violence in this show like they could come across based on the amount of kills that are done in the game. This episode was incredibly important. We were sold on Bill and Frank, but now this episode had to sell us on this duo of Joel and Ellie, because this is pretty much who we're going to be watching the rest of the series, or at least for the rest of this season. And without this duo being built, it's almost like the rest of the show's just not going to matter. So you needed episode 4 there. While it definitely wasn't my favorite, I was much more impressed by the third episode of the show. They brought in a new character with the Raiders. They humanized the Raiders. One of the Raiders, in fact, was the voice of Tommy in the video game. That's just a fun fact. The Raider named Perry, but the Raiders felt very humanized. I like that they built that something was lurking underground. They even built the idea of the character of Henry in this episode, and Sam, who are very important in the video game, but they weren't set up so early on. And I like that they keep doing this throughout the show. They set up these side characters very early on and make them more significant. Every deviation in the show is just better than what's in the game, and it just keeps getting better and better and better. And Kathleen is such a great menacing character because she has a very sweet voice. You don't expect her to just be upset and just filled with rage the way that she is, and when she is, it really hits for that reason. Of course, episode 5 jumps back in time to show what happened from Sam and Henry's perspective on this whole episode 4 and how their story was playing out. And it did it in a total of maybe 10-15 minutes, which I was really impressed by, and just added so much more character development for these two characters. But I do think it was important to make Sam and Henry both incredibly likable. This kid, by the way, and I'm sorry I don't have his name, who played Sam, unbelievable. And apparently this was his first acting gig to my knowledge. I think that kid's gonna be a star. He was amazing. Henry was incredibly likable from the get-go. He was so honest with Sam. I enjoyed that honesty. He was telling him things you typically wouldn't tell a child, but they're also kind of at war right now with these Raiders, and he needs to make Sam understand that we just have to keep moving forward, and honesty was the best policy. He was also incredibly transparent with Joel. I love that he was saying that his plan was not perfect. Joel knew it and Henry knew it too, and they both kind of had this discussion where it was two guys who were very skeptical about how in the hell to get out, but they knew that the only way to do it was to help each other. It's just fantastic storytelling. There's no other way to put it. They go through these tunnels where they end up finding this whole thing that's this whole storyline in the game about Ish. They find this whole like classroom area. You won't find out about Ish in this, but it does kind of give you little hints of what could have been going on, and it's not like you're missing anything just because that point from the game was in the show. I love that they gave Ellie and Sam moments to just be children here too, and we really got to build out their relationship and their chemistry, which was just absolutely off the charts. Fantastic stuff. Just enhanced those characters' relationships so much. By the time time you get to the ending, you're going to be that much more emotional about what happens, which we'll get to here in a bit. I love that you kind of find out that Henry ratted out Kathleen's brother. That's why she's looking for him. It's intertwined perfectly with everything that was set up in the last episode. All your questions are answered with not a whole lot. The biggest difference in the tunnels here is there are no infected in these tunnels. In the show, there's a lot in the game. There was a lot more in the game too prior to this in the entire show, though. This show was really kind of holding out on infected. We get to this neighborhood at the end, which looks just like it did in the game. The exception here, though, is that this took place at night. In the game, it definitely takes place during the daytime. Joel having to get up to the sniper was a big deal because that happened in the game, but they changed something here too that was even better. They made the guy old. They made him blind. That's why he was missing all the shots. He could barely see, and he almost went on a suicide mission by trying to shoot Joel, and Joel had to take him down, but the old man just wanted out. You could see he was a seasoned warrior. He didn't want to do this anymore. The raiders show up to confront Sam in a very intense exchange where Kathleen's talking about how children die all the time. It really doesn't matter. I love here too that Henry was prepared to let Joel take Sam and trust that Joel would take care of him, because Henry realized earlier that Joel was also once a father, and he knows that Joel has the father instinct. Luckily, Henry gets saved by the bell when the hole opens up, because they did set up that there were infected underground, ran down there by Fedra a long time ago, and I love that setup. And out of this hole comes pretty much every infected that we were supposed to get earlier, that would have came earlier in the game. Pretty much was all being saved up and built up to this one moment. Yes, there are infected in the game in this moment, but it's not this big swarm, I'll tell you that much. And Joel's taking them out left, right, and center, trying to defend Ellie. Ellie's kind of taking care of herself at the same time. This is a fantastic scene. This action sequence is done mostly practically, and it had to be a bitch to shoot. I couldn't imagine what went into this. The fire was practical. It looked amazing. Also here in this moment, we're introduced to a bloater, which is really fantastic. These things are damn near impossible to kill in the game. It's pretty much impossible, period, to kill in this show, and I like that little touch. The bloater rips off Perry's head, and then Kathleen dies because she couldn't get rid of her vengeance that's in her heart. The show is just so poetic in the way that it explores these themes. Had she had just ran the other way and not went for Joel, she would have lived. So there's a little bit of a moral ground within this episode as well, which I really love. Obviously, while everybody's busy fighting the infected, Sam, Henry, Ellie, Joel, they all get out of there. They continue with their escape route to this home, and I really love this scene. It's pretty much straight out of the game. One of the big additions, obviously, and I love that it's not mentioned in the episode blatantly, but they made Sam deaf. I like that that's just a characteristic here and not something that's blatantly mentioned, but it allowed them to do something even more interesting with the exchange between Sam and Ellie. And Sam actually reveals to Ellie that he was bitten in the leg. That did not happen in the game. I actually believe he was bitten in the arm, and he never told Ellie. But in the morning, everything plays out the same. Ellie gets attacked by Sam. I knew this was all coming too, by the way, because I played the game, but Henry shoots Sam, points the gun at Joel, and then shoots himself, and it is one of the most dramatic scenes I've seen on television ever. I was sitting next to somebody who hadn't played the game when I was watching this episode, and I heard the audible gasp when this happened. One of the changes that I love that they made for the show is they showed Ellie's facial expression when it happened instead, and it just allowed for Bella Ramsey to do some incredible acting in this episode. Her acting in this episode blew me away. When Sam was attacking Ellie, I mean, my gosh, the excruciating screams coming out of her just to make that moment that much more intense were incredible. Bella Ramsey is doing amazing work in this show. And I love the final moments where Ellie takes the magic slate that she was using to communicate with Sam, throws it onto his grave that they basically dug up for him, and it says, "I'm sorry." And Joel sees this, and then Ellie just has this coldness about her. She looks at Joel and says, "Which way's west?" It's the same coldness that Joel was using, the same mask that Joel had put on in the beginning of episode 4 that we saw on him in the beginning of episode 4, trying to move on from Tessa's death, and he sees that in her, and I don't think he wants her to go down the same path. I think that's kind of what they're trying to play here, and I think Sam and Henry's death is going to make an even bigger impact on these two than we saw in the game moving forward. Guys, these two episodes were just a masterclass in filmmaking. The way that they played together so cohesively, all the dramatic themes that were explored, the moral ground that was kind of explained and expanded upon in one self-contained piece of the story of the show. It's unbelievable. They continue to blow me away with every deviation they make. Episode 5 was my favorite episode, by the way, with 3 being my second favorite, and it just elevated episode 4 so much more. It's incredible. Before I get out of here, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the channel, leave some feedback in the comment section, share this with your friends, and hit the bell for notifications. I am Martino, and I will talk to you guys later.